The flight suit hit the ground with a dull thud in the hangar. 200 eyes watched as Colonel Marcus Blackwood stepped forward and crushed the insignia under his boot. "You want to play aviator? Think they lowered the standards just so you could belong," he spat. "Maybe we should get you a desk job instead." Elena Rodriguez didn't blink. She unpinned her wings, placed them beside the crumpled fabric, and turned. A faint tattoo shimmered under her collar, an eagle wrapped in lightning. She paused at the door. "I'll see you all tomorrow, up on the observation deck." Someone stood frozen. They'd just recognized that tattoo. What would you have done in that moment? Would you have fought back, walked away in silence, or found another way to reclaim your dignity? Sometimes the most powerful response isn't the one we expect. The hidden. Teacher Elena Rodriguez lived in a modest apartment on the outskirts of Denver, Colorado, where the mountain air was thin and the winter nights stretched long. At 35, she had the kind of face that people forgot immediately. Pleasant enough, with dark brown hair she kept in a simple ponytail and clothes that seemed designed to blend into any crowd. Her neighbors at the Rockview Heights complex knew her as the quiet woman in Unit 418 who taught high school physics and never complained when their kids played soccer too loudly in the courtyard. Every morning at 5:30 she ran 8 miles through the empty streets, avoiding the popular trails where other runners might try to make small talk. Her apartment reflected the same deliberate simplicity: white walls, minimal furniture, a single bookshelf filled with physics textbooks and aviation manuals that no one ever noticed. The only decoration was a small, framed photograph on the kitchen counter, too faded and distant for visitors to make out the details of the military aircraft silhouetted against a sunset sky. She had no social media presence, no connections to her past life that anyone could trace. Her phone, an old model that could barely manage texts, sat silent on the counter most days. When the other teachers at Mountain View High invited her to happy hour, she politely declined with excuses about grading papers or preparing lessons. They'd stopped asking after the first year. The principal, Dr. Martinez, once told her she was the most reliable teacher he'd ever hired. Never sick, never late, never any drama. "You're like a phantom," he joked, not knowing how close to the truth he'd stumbled. But phantoms have histories, and Elena's was buried beneath 10 years of careful construction. The call to return, when she'd seen the announcement for the civilian-to-military pilot program at Peterson Air Force Base, something she'd thought was dead had stirred in her chest. She'd filled out the application with the same neat handwriting she used on her students' progress reports, listing only 600 hours in a Cessna 172 under her flight experience. It was technically true. She had logged exactly 600 hours in that model. The other 200 hours in everything from F-35s to experimental aircraft that didn't officially exist remained unmentioned. The selection committee had almost rejected her application. Another hobbyist thinking Top Gun was a documentary. One evaluator had written in the margins, but something about her test scores, perfect on every technical assessment, had caught their attention. When she arrived for the first day of training, she'd parked her 10-year-old Toyota Camry between a Mercedes and a BMW, gathered her single bag of gear, and walked into a world she'd once ruled from 40,000 feet. None of the other candidates looked at her twice. She was just another middle-aged dreamer in a program full of corporate pilots and wealthy enthusiasts who thought military aviation would be their next adventure. Ryan Sterling, son of Senator Sterling and heir to a tech fortune, had laughed when he saw her during orientation. "Lost, Mom. The visitor center is in the other building." Elena had simply taken her seat in the back row, opened her notebook, and began writing in the margins, not notes about the briefing, but calculations for optimal energy management in a vertical climb, habits that died harder than dreams. The Ghost's origin. 10 years earlier, Captain Elena Rodriguez had been the youngest pilot ever to qualify on the F-35 Lightning. They called her Thunder not because she was loud, but because of her uncanny ability to appear in an enemy's position without warning, like a bolt from clear skies at 45,000 feet. The instructors at the Air Force Academy had run out of challenges for her by her second year. She graduated summa cum laude from Stanford's Aerospace Engineering program at 21, spoke fluent Spanish, Mandarin, and Russian, and could disassemble and reassemble an F-16's flight control system blindfolded. The psychiatric evaluators had flagged her for exceptional spatial intelligence and reaction times that bordered on superhuman. "This one's special," General Patricia Stone had written in her file. "Career trajectory, unlimited, but talent in the military was like blood in shark-infested waters. It attracted predators." Major Victor Kane had been her squadron commander at Nellis Air Force Base, a man who'd spent 15 years climbing the ranks through political connections, rather than skill. The first time Elena had outflown him in a training exercise, his pride had curdled into something darker. She'd executed a perfect Herbst maneuver at 9 Gs while he'd blacked out trying to follow her through the turn. The other pilots had started requesting to fly as her wingman, quoting her tactical innovations in briefings, looking to her for guidance despite Kane's superior rank. He began his campaign silently, scheduling conflicts that kept her out of important meetings, maintenance delays on her aircraft, before critical evaluations, performance reports that praised with faint criticism. But Elena had something Kane couldn't manipulate: raw, undeniable ability. The betrayal, when the Air Force needed someone for Operation Steel Phoenix, a classified mission over Eastern European airspace, she'd been the unanimous choice despite Kane's objections. The mission parameters were simple: penetrate advanced air defenses, eliminate a weapons facility, and return without creating an international incident. Kane had volunteered to handle the tactical planning, insisting it was his responsibility as squadron commander. Elena had studied the briefing materials he'd provided, memorizing every waypoint, every threat assessment, every contingency plan. But when she'd crossed into hostile airspace at 2 a.m., flying so low her radar altimeter showed 20 feet, the coordinates led straight into an ambush. 3 MiG-29s materialized from the darkness, and ground-based missile sites lit up like a Christmas tree. Kane had either made a catastrophic error or deliberately sent her to die. In 90 seconds of violence that would never appear in any official record, Elena had shot down all 3 MiGs and destroyed 2 missile sites before escaping at Mach 1.9. The weapons facility remained untouched. She'd chosen to survive rather than complete a mission based on false intelligence. The investigation that followed was a masterclass in military politics. Kane had already deleted the original mission files, replacing them with versions that showed Elena had deviated from the flight plan. He testified that she'd gone rogue, pursuing personal glory over mission objectives. Elena could have fought back, could have revealed the discrepancies she'd documented. But she knew how these stories ended. Kane had connections, she had the truth. In the military justice system, connections usually won. But Kane had made one mistake. He'd assumed Elena's younger brother, Captain Miguel Rodriguez, would stay out of it. The ultimate price Miguel, a helicopter pilot with the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, had watched his sister's career implode with helpless rage. When Kane was assigned to plan another high-risk operation in Afghanistan, Miguel had volunteered to take Elena's place, claiming she was too emotionally compromised to fly. Kane, unaware of the substitution until the last moment, had proceeded, with his original plan, another set of falsified coordinates, another ambush designed to eliminate a threat to his career. Miguel Rodriguez's Black Hawk was shot down 17 minutes into the mission. The official report blamed mechanical failure and enemy action. Elena knew better. She'd stood in Arlington National Cemetery on a cold November morning, watching them fold the flag that had covered her brother's casket, and made two decisions. First, she would resign her commission immediately, disappearing so completely that Kane would never have another chance to destroy someone she loved. Second, she would never forget. Not for revenge, Miguel wouldn't have wanted that, but for justice, if the opportunity ever arose. The quiet years, she turned in her wings the next day, signed papers that most people never knew existed, and vanished from the world of military aviation. The CIA had tried to recruit her. Private military contractors had offered seven-figure salaries. General Stone had personally called to beg her to reconsider. She'd refused them all, choosing instead to teach physics to teenagers who would never know their teacher had once danced with death in the stratosphere. For 10 years, she'd built a life so ordinary it was almost invisible. She'd learned to find satisfaction in small victories, a struggling student finally understanding momentum, the meditative rhythm of her morning runs, the way the mountains looked after fresh snowfall. She'd almost convinced herself it was enough. Then, she'd seen the announcement for the Peterson program, and below the official signature, a name that made her blood run cold: Colonel Marcus Blackwood, commanding officer. Victor Kane had changed his name after a scandal involving misappropriated funds, not enough to end his career, but sufficient to require a fresh start. Elena had stared at the announcement for hours, remembering her brother's laugh, the way he'd always defended her, even when she didn't need defending, how he died believing in a system that had betrayed them both. She'd submitted her application that night, knowing exactly what she was walking into, knowing exactly how it would end. The program begins. The humiliation started small in the first week of training, like drops of water beginning what would become a flood. Ryan Sterling had established himself as the alpha of their class within hours. His 3,500 hours of corporate jet time and family connections made him the natural center of gravity for the other wealthy civilians playing soldier. He'd created an informal study group that met in the officers' club, casually forgetting to invite Eleanor and the 3 other women in the program. During breaks, he'd hold court with technical discussions deliberately pitched just loud enough for her to hear. The thing about high-altitude navigation, he'd say, spreading his hands like a professor, is that you need instinct you can only develop with real jet time. These small plane pilots think it's just about following instruments, but when you're pushing Mach 1.2, everything changes. Elena would continue writing in her notebook, calculating thrust-to-weight ratios and optimal corner velocities, letting their laughter wash over her like white noise. The instructors, taking their cues from the social hierarchy, began calling on her for the most complex questions, clearly hoping to embarrass her. "Rodriguez!" Major David Cross barked during a systems class. "Explain the failure modes in the F-35's fly-by-wire system and how they differ from legacy aircraft." Elena had delivered a 12-minute dissertation that included failure probabilities, redundancy architecture, and software voting logic, then sat back down without expression. The room had gone silent. Cross, flustered, had muttered something about textbook knowledge versus practical experience and moved on, but her competence only made things worse. The sabotage escalates. During simulator sessions, her aircraft would develop mysterious faults. The hydraulic pressure would drop without warning, or the navigation system would reset mid-flight. Tom Martinez, the senior technician, had pulled her aside after the third incident. "Someone's accessing your SIM profile after hours," he'd whispered, "changing parameters, introducing failures. I'd report it, but—" He'd glanced toward Blackwood's office and shrugged helplessly. By week 8, the sabotage had become brazen. Eleanor would arrive to find her training materials missing, her locker emptied, her parking spot blocked by orange cones. The other women in the program, Jessica Kim, a former airline pilot, Maria Santos, a Coast Guard transfer, and Amy Chen, an aerospace engineer, had initially shown solidarity, but Sterling's influence was insidious. He'd taken Jessica aside during a formation briefing, his voice carrying just enough for others to hear. "You've got real potential, Kim. Shame to see it wasted by associating with the wrong people." My father's on the aviation committee. He remembers talent when he sees it, and he remembers disappointments too. Jessica had started sitting on the opposite side of the classroom, avoiding eye contact with Elena in the hallways. Maria and Amy had followed suit within days, survival instinct overcoming sisterhood. Colonel Blackwood had watched this social isolation with satisfaction, occasionally adding his own special touches. During briefings, he'd single Eleanor out for public criticism. "Rodriguez, your flight plan is technically correct, but shows no tactical awareness. This isn't a civilian pleasure flight operation. We need warriors, not calculator operators." When she'd executed a perfect overhead brake pattern in the T-38, when her combat scores exceeded everyone else's, he'd question the simulator's calibration. The message was clear to everyone. Elena Rodriguez was not welcome here, and anyone who supported her would share her fate. The formation test, the psychological warfare, reached its peak during the 12th week's formation flying evaluation. Elena had been assigned to lead a 4-ship formation with the 3 weakest pilots in the class, students who'd barely passed their basic maneuver checks. Sterling led the opposing formation, hand-picking the top performers for his team. "Don't worry, Rodriguez," he'd called out during the brief. "When you wash out, I'm sure there's a flight school somewhere that needs a ground instructor." But something happened when Elena strapped into the T-38 that day. For the first time in 10 years, she felt the familiar calm descend, that crystalline clarity that had made her a legend in fighter squadrons across the world. The 3 struggling pilots behind her were terrified, their radio calls shaky, their formation loose. Elena keyed her mic, her voice cutting through their panic with absolute authority. "Phoenix Flight, this is lead. Listen to my voice and trust your training. We're going to fly as one unit. Copy my movements exactly. Don't think, just follow." For the next 45 minutes, she flew with such precision that her wingmen found themselves matching her instinctively, their aircraft moving in perfect synchronization. When Sterling's formation attempted an aggressive intercept, Elena led her flight through a series of tactical maneuvers that shouldn't have been possible with novice pilots. She used their predictability as a strength, keeping the formation simple while positioning them in ways that maximized their defensive geometry. The debrief video showed something extraordinary: 4 aircraft moving like fingers of the same hand, executing basic maneuvers with such perfect timing that they defeated every attack. Blackwood had watched the replay 3 times, his face growing darker with each viewing. "There must be a malfunction in the recording system," he'd announced. "No one flies formation like that on their first attempt. We'll repeat the exercise tomorrow." But the repeat only confirmed what everyone had seen. Elena Rodriguez wasn't just competent. She was operating on a level that made their entire program look amateur. The revelation, the struggling pilots she'd led came to her afterward, tears in their eyes. "Mom, I've never felt flying like that," one said. "It was like you were in my cockpit with me." Elena had smiled, the first genuine expression anyone had seen from her. You always had it in you. Sometimes we just need someone to show us the way. The midterm evaluation should have been Elena's vindication. The combat simulation exercise pitted two 4-ship formations against each other in beyond visual range engagement. Elena's team consisted of the same 3 novice pilots, while Sterling commanded the program's elite. In any rational scenario, it should have been a massacre. The exercise began with Sterling's formation in perfect offensive position, 40-mile separation with altitude and speed advantage. Elena's team was scattered, defensive, seemingly out of options. Blackwood watched from the control room, anticipating the quick elimination that would justify removing her from the program. But Elena had spent 12 weeks studying every pilot in the class, cataloguing their habits, their reactions under stress, their tells. She knew Sterling always led with a specific radar pattern. She knew his wingman favored high angles of attack. She knew their formation would split in a predictable pattern when pressed. Phoenix flight, tactical turn west, descend to Angels 5. Commanded, "Kill your radars, we're going dark." The 3 novices followed without question, their faith in her absolute after the formation flight. For 30 seconds, Sterling's team lost contact, their radar sweeps finding empty sky. When Elena's flight reappeared, they'd reversed the geometry entirely. Phoenix flight, select targets by voice. Phoenix 2, target the northern bandit. Phoenix 3, middle. Phoenix 4, take the trailer. I've got lead. Fox 3, now. 4 simultaneous missile launches appeared on the simulation. Sterling's formation, caught completely off guard, attempted evasive maneuvers, but Elena had positioned her shots during their blind spot, calculating their reaction time down to the 1/10 of a second. The computer registered 4 kills in 8 seconds. The control room erupted in chaos. Instructors who'd flown combat missions were speechless. Blackwood slammed his fist on the console. "Reset the simulation! Malfunction!" They ran it again. This time, Elena eliminated Sterling's formation to 6 seconds, having learned their panic reactions from the first engagement. By the 3rd reset, her novice wingmen were laughing over the radio, their confidence soaring with each victory. "Mom," Phoenix 3 called out, "I think I understand energy management now." "Mom," Phoenix 2 added, "can you teach us that barrel roll defense after this?" Even Sterling's elite pilots were asking questions during the debrief. Professionals teaching curiosity overcoming social pressure. But Blackwood shut down the discussion with a snarl. "This proves nothing except that our simulation parameters need adjustment. Real combat isn't a video game, Rodriguez. You're showing off, endangering your wingmen, and violating basic tactical doctrine." He turned to the class. "This is what happens when people think they're above the system. They get lucky once and think they're invincible. In real combat, hot shots get people killed." The public humiliation, the public confrontation that followed, was inevitable. Blackwood had called an all-hands meeting in the main hangar, ostensibly to discuss the upcoming final evaluations. But everyone knew the real purpose when they saw Elena's name on the briefing board with a red line through it. 200 students and instructors gathered in a circle, leaving Elena standing alone in the center, like some medieval trial. Blackwood had prepared his speech carefully, building his case with bureaucratic precision. Her flight log showed irregularities. Her simulation scores were statistically impossible without assistance. Her background check had gaps that raised security concerns. Each accusation was vague enough to avoid legal challenge, but specific enough to destroy reputation. "The military aviation community is built on trust," Blackwood concluded, his voice carrying the righteousness of a crusader. "We trust our wingmen with our lives. How can anyone trust someone who refuses to integrate with her peers, who shows off at the expense of mission success, who thinks the rules don't apply to her?" He gestured to Ryan Sterling, and the other top students. These are the future of military aviation, team players who understand that individual glory has no place in the cockpit. Rodriguez represents everything wrong with the modern push for inclusion over excellence. The crowd had shifted uncomfortably, but no one spoke up. The social dynamics were clear. Oppose Blackwood and share Elena's fate. So I'm giving you a choice. Rodriguez, Blackwood had continued, his voice dropping to a threatening whisper that somehow carried through the hangar. Remove your uniform voluntarily and leave with whatever dignity you have left, or I'll have security escort you out after I detail every failure, every shortcoming, every reason you'll never belong in military aviation. He'd paused for effect. What's it going to be? Elena had stood motionless through the entire speech, her eyes focused on something beyond the mob surrounding her. When she finally moved, it was with deliberate precision. She'd unpinned her wings, removed her flight jacket, and placed both carefully on the ground. The silence was absolute. Even the ventilation system seemed to pause. The phone call that night. Eleanor sat in her apartment holding the wooden box she hadn't opened in a decade. Inside, wrapped in acid-free tissue, lay the remnants of a different life. Her major's oak leaves, the promotion that had come through 2 weeks after she'd resigned, General Stone's way of ensuring she'd retain her rank if she ever returned, the Silver Star from a classified mission over the Middle East, when shrapnel had torn through her canopy, the Distinguished Flying Cross with valor device for actions during a rescue operation that saved 12 special operators. Beneath the medals, a letter in her brother's handwriting. Elena, if you're reading this, something's gone wrong. Don't blame yourself. You taught me to fly long before I ever sat in a cockpit. You taught me that courage isn't about being fearless. It's about doing what's right, especially when you're terrified. Whatever happens, remember that you carry the sky in your soul. Nobody can take that from you. Aim high, sister. Under the letter, a sealed envelope marked, open only in case of emergency, in General Stone's precise script. Elena broke the seal, her hands steady despite the tears. Inside, a single sheet of paper and a phone number. Elena, I know you. I know you'll disappear. Try to protect everyone else by removing yourself from the equation. But Kane isn't done. He'll hurt others. When you're ready to stop him, call this number. Some battles can't be won by walking away. She'd stared at the phone number for an hour, remembering every pilot Kane had sabotaged, every career he'd destroyed, every life he'd twisted to feed his ego. Tomorrow he would humiliate her in front of the entire aviation community, cementing his power and ensuring no one would ever challenge him again. Unless she reminded them all what real power looked like. She dialed the number at midnight. The voice that answered was familiar, older, but still carrying absolute authority. Yanashcha.
Stone, it's Thunder. I need a favor, a big one. Elena? The warmth in her voice almost broke Elena's composure. I've been waiting 10 years for this call. What do you need?
She'd taken a breath, decision crystallizing. I need something that will make a statement. Something that can't be denied, can't be covered up, can't be explained away. Stone had laughed, a sound like distant thunder. How do you feel about
European engineering? I happen to know where we can borrow a Eurofighter for a few hours. Diplomatic training exchange, completely legal if anyone asks. Mom, that's a frontline fighter aircraft. The political implications? Elena, Stoner
interrupted gently. Do you really think Kane is the only one who's been playing politics? I've got 12 senators and the Secretary of the Air Force ready to move on him. But we need cause. We need something dramatic enough that the media picks it up, public enough that it can't be buried. You showing up in one of the world's most advanced
fighters after he publicly says you can't fly. That's the kind of story that ends careers.
Elena had smiled for the second time in weeks. When? 800 tomorrow. Nellis has one on the ramp for Allied training. Captain Williams will have a family emergency and will need a qualified replacement. Lucky thing we have someone with the proper certifications. Man, my certifications expired 10 years ago, did they? Funny, my records show you've been maintaining proficiency as a test pilot for classified programs. Black budget stuff, very hush-hush. Stone paused. Helena, are you sure about this? There's no going back to hiding. She looked at Miguel's photo, at the brother who died believing in justice. I've been hiding for 10 years, Mum. It's time to remember who I am. Dawn of reckoning. Dawn came slowly to the Colorado mountains, painting the peaks purple and gold as Eleanor drove toward Peterson Air Force Base for the last time. She'd left her Toyota at home, calling a taxi instead, carrying only a small bag. With her original flight suit, the one with no name tag, no rank, no unit patches, the ghost suit worn by test pilots flying aircraft that didn't officially exist. The gate guards had waved the taxi through without question, her name already on the access list, with clearances that would have shocked anyone who looked too closely. She directed the driver to the visiting officer's quarters, tipping him generously before walking to the flight line with the easy confidence of someone who belonged there. The Eurofighter Typhoon sat on the ramp like a predatory bird, its delta wings catching the early morning light. The crew chief, a Master Sergeant with knowing eyes, had saluted crisply. Ma'am, she's fueled and armed with training rounds. Weather's clear, winds calm. General Stone sends her regards. Elena had walked around the aircraft, running her hands along its surfaces, feeling the subtle differences from American designs. Beautiful bird, Sergeant. Thank you for taking care of her. Ma'am, if I may, we all heard what happened yesterday. Some of us remember when you flew with the 48th, what you did for Lieutenant Morrison when his hydraulics failed, how you talked him through that landing when everyone else had written him off. He'd straightened. It's an honor to prep your aircraft again. She'd climbed into the cockpit, muscle memory taking over despite the decade-long gap. The Typhoon's systems were different, but not alien. Good engineering transcended nationality. As she ran through the pre-flight checklist, each switch and gauge felt like greeting an old friend. The engines had started with a whisper that built to a roar, and suddenly she wasn't a math teacher anymore. She was thunder, and she had work to do. The return at exactly 800, Blackwood had stood before the assembled crowd in Hangar 7, Elena's uniform still crumpled on the floor where she'd left it. He'd prepared a speech about standards, about maintaining excellence, about how the previous day's events demonstrated why emotional stability was crucial for military aviators. Ryan Sterling and his cohort stood in the front row, their smirks visible from across the hangar. The 3 novice pilots Elena had led clustered in the back, their faces showing a mix of anger and disappointment. Jessica Kim kept checking her phone, frowning at something on the screen. Blackwood had just reached the crescendo of his speech. This is why we maintain the highest standards, why we cannot allow sympathy or political correctness to compromise. The building shook. The windows rattled in their frames as a sound like tearing silk split the air. Then came the boom, not an explosion, but the distinctive crack of a sonic. Boom directly overhead. 200 heads turned skyward as one. Through the massive hangar doors, they saw something impossible, a Eurofighter Typhoon in Royal Air Force colors executing a perfect knife-edge pass at 500 feet, its pilot visible in the bubble canopy. The aircraft climbed vertically, accelerating. through 15,000 feet in seconds, then pivoted on its axis in a maneuver that defied physics. "Alert the tower!" Blackwood screamed. "We have an airspace violation. Scramble the alert fighters." But the tower was strangely calm. "Peterson Tower to all personnel, stand down. We have authorized Allied training in progress. Repeat, this is authorized Allied training." The Typhoon had reached 30,000 feet and was now diving back toward the deck, rolling as it fell in a perfect corkscrew that would have torn apart a lesser aircraft or pilot. At the last possible second, it pulled out of the dive, passing over the hangar, inverted.
At 200 feet.
The pilot's helmeted head was clearly visible, looking down at the assembled crowd. Then the radio crackled to life on the hangar speakers. Someone in the tower had decided everyone needed to hear this. "Peterson Tower, this is Thunder Zero, request permission for tactical demonstration." The voice was calm, professional, and unmistakably Elena Rodriguez's, the tower controller's, response carried barely suppressed excitement. "Thunder Zero, Peterson Tower, you are cleared for whatever you need to do, ma'am. The airspace is yours." The demonstration chaos erupted in the hangar. The older instructors who recognized the call sign stood frozen. Thunder was a legend, a story told in ready rooms about the pilot who could make an F-35 dance ballet. The younger pilots pulled out phones, frantically Googling, finding only fragments, classified missions, redacted reports, whispers of impossible achievements. Blackwood's face had gone from red to white. He was screaming into his phone, demanding answers, but no one was listening. On the flight line, the Typhoon began a display that would be analyzed in aviation forums for years. Elena executed the complete aerobatic catalogue of maneuvers, but with variations that shouldn't have been possible. She transitioned from a tail slide directly into a Pugachev's Cobra, recovered into a rolling circle while maintaining perfect altitude, then punctuated it with a kulbit that flowed into a bell maneuver. Each maneuver was performed with surgical precision, the aircraft an extension of her will rather than a machine.
"Holy," Ryan Sterling whispered, his arrogance evaporating. She's actually doing it. That's a 12G maneuver. Nobody can..." "She can," Jessica Kim said quietly. "I looked her up last night after yesterday. Youngest pilot ever.
Qualified on the F-35, first woman to complete the classified red flag, advanced course. 21 confirmed kills in combat operations we're not supposed to know about. We've been trying to humiliate someone who could fly circles around the entire Air Force." The demonstration continued for 20 minutes, each maneuver more impossible than
the last. Elena painted invisible pictures in the sky, using smoke generators to create patterns that spelled out messages only pilots would understand. She flew the aircraft backwards for 30 seconds, maintaining perfect control.
She performed a flat spin recovery that transitioned into a hammerhead stall, then accelerated vertically until the Typhoon was a speck against the blue. The grand finale was something no one had seen before, a controlled flat spin that descended from 20,000 feet to 1,000 feet, the aircraft rotating like a falling leaf, but with perfect control, before recovering 50 feet above the runway and rocketing back skyward. Then she spoke again, her voice filling the hangar. "Colonel Blackwood."
Or should I say Victor Kane? "I know who you are. I know what you did 10 years ago. You killed my brother with your lies and ambition. Today I'm not here for revenge. I'm here to show everyone what you tried to destroy." She paused, letting the
words sink in. "You told me to take off my uniform. I did, but you forgot something important. You can't take away wings that were earned in blood. Some things can't be stripped away." The Typhoon descended again, this time in a gentle spiral that brought it to pattern altitude. Elena's voice returned, conversational now. To the students in Hangar 7, especially Phoenix 2, 3 and 4, remember this. Greatness isn't about showing
others how small they are. It's about lifting them up until they can fly beside you. Don't let anyone tell you that you don't belong in the sky. The sky doesn't care about politics or prejudice. It only cares about courage. The aircraft made
one final pass, slow and level, landing gear extended in the traditional salute to fallen aviators. As it passed the hangar, Elena opened the canopy and rendered a perfect salute, not to Blackwood, not to the crowd, but to the memory of all those who'd been crushed by the system. Then she was gone, the typhoon climbing toward the morning sun, until it disappeared into the blue. Justice served in the stunned silence that followed. A convoy of black SUVs appeared on the flight line. General Stone stepped out of the lead vehicle, accompanied by federal agents and Air Force security personnel. She walked directly to Blackwood, who stood frozen in place. "Victor Kane," Stone announced, her voice carrying the weight of military authority. "You are under arrest for conspiracy, conduct unbecoming an officer, filing false official statements, and contributing to the wrongful death of Captain Miguel Rodriguez." As the agents cuffed Blackwood, Stone turned to address the crowd. "For 10 years, we've been building a case against this man, but we needed proof of pattern behavior, evidence that he would continue his crimes given the opportunity. Major Rodriguez volunteered to provide that evidence, enduring 16 weeks of harassment and discrimination while documenting every instance. She paused, looking at each face. "Let this be a lesson. The warriors you mock might be legends in disguise. The quiet ones might be choosing restraint over retaliation, and sometimes justice comes on wings you never see coming." Return to purpose. 1 week later, Elena Rodriguez returned to her morning routine in Denver. 5:30 a.m., 8 miles through the empty streets, the mountain air cool against her skin. But this morning was different. As she reached the halfway point of her run, footsteps fell in beside her. Jessica Kim matched her pace, breathing hard but determined. "Major Rodriguez," Jessica said, "I need to apologize." Elena slowed slightly, allowing the younger woman to catch her breath. "No apology necessary. You were protecting your career. I understand that choice." "But it was wrong," Jessica insisted.
"I knew it was wrong when I was doing it. I was so afraid. All my life I've fought to be taken seriously as a female pilot. I thought if I just kept my head down, played their games." She trailed off. "And now?" Eleanor asked gently. They ran in silence for a moment before Jessica answered. "Now I know that playing their games means becoming them. You showed us another way. You could have destroyed all of us when you revealed who you were. Instead, you protected us, even lifted us up. My brother used to say that the best leaders are the ones who make everyone around them better," Elena said.
"I forgot that for a while. Hiding isn't leadership, but neither is vengeance. Are you coming back to the Air Force? I mean, they'd give you any position you wanted now." Elena smiled, the expression transforming her face. "No, my flying days
aren't over, but my military days are. I found peace in teaching, in helping kids who think they're not smart enough or good enough see their own potential. That's my mission now." "But you're the best pilot in the world," Jessica protested.
You could be training the next generation of fighter pilots, reshaping the entire culture." "I am training the next generation," Elena corrected, "just not in the cockpit. Every student who learns to solve for velocity in my classroom learns the problems have solutions. Every kid who conquers their fear of physics learns they can conquer other fears. Every young woman who sees that their female physics teacher used to fly fighters learns that limits are often self-imposed. They reached the end of the trail where Jessica's car was parked. As they cooled down, stretching in the morning light, Jessica asked one more question. "The typhoon, how did you... you haven't flown in 10 years. Elena's eyes sparkled with mischief. "Who says I haven't flown? Test pilots for classified programs don't file public flight plans. Some secrets are worth keeping even from yourself until you need them." 6 months later, the scandal of Colonel Marcus Blackwood, Victor Kane, had rocked the military aviation community. Investigations revealed decades of discrimination, sabotage, and abuse of power. 18 other officers were implicated and sweeping reforms followed. Ryan Sterling, humbled and transformed by the experience, had written a public letter apologizing for his behavior and pledging to use his family's influence to promote real equality in aviation. He now mentored disadvantaged youth interested in flying careers. The 3 novice pilots Elena had led, Phoenix 2, 3, and 4, had all graduated with honors, crediting their success to the mysterious instructor who'd shown them how to fly with confidence. They wore small thunder patches on their flight suits, unauthorized but overlooked by command. At Mountain View High School, Elena's advanced physics class had grown from 15 students to 52. Word had spread that Ms. Rodriguez's class was different, that she taught not just formulas but problem-solving approaches that applied to life. Her pass rate on the AP physics exam was 98%, unprecedented for a Title I school. She still ran every morning, still lived quietly, but something had changed. The ghost had found peace not in hiding, but in purpose. The visit grading papers in her classroom after hours, Elena heard a knock. General Stone stood in the doorway, out of uniform, looking older but satisfied. "Mind if I come in?" "Of course not, Ma'am." She gestured to a student desk, smiling, as the general folded her frame into the small seat. "I wanted to thank you personally," Stone said. "Not just for Kane, but for what came after, the reforms, the culture change. It wouldn't have happened without your courage." "Miguel's sacrifice," Elena corrected. "I just finished what he started." Stone nodded, then pulled out an envelope. "The President wants to award you the Medal of Honor, retroactive, for your actions in Syria and the 17 lives you saved in Afghanistan. Full ceremony, media coverage, the works." Elena took the envelope, but didn't open it. "With respect, Ma'am, I'll decline. Medals are for people who need external validation. I know what I did." "Miguel knew. That's enough. I told them you'd say that," Stone smiled. "So I have an alternative offer. No publicity, just a consultancy position with the Air Force Academy. 2 weeks a year. You help design curriculum that teaches not just tactics, but ethics. Not just flying, but leadership. Interested?" Elena considered, looking at the equations on her whiteboard, the student papers on her desk, the life she'd built from the ashes of tragedy. 2 weeks a year, I keep my teaching position here? Of course, we need you doing exactly what you're doing, but we also need your perspective to ensure we never create another Kane. Then yes, Elena decided. For Miguel, for all the pilots who deserve better leaders. Stone stood to leave, pausing at the door. "You know, when you flew that Typhoon, you didn't just humiliate Kane, you reminded an entire generation why we fly, not for glory or power, but for the pure joy of defying gravity. Thank you for that reminder." After she left, Elena returned to grading papers. One student had written at the bottom of their test, Ms. Rodriguez, I used to think physics was about finding the right answer. Now I know it's about finding the right question. Thank you for teaching me to fly." She wrote, in the margin, "You always had wings. I just helped you unfold them." The memorial, on a clear morning. 1 year after the typhoon flight, a dedication ceremony was held at Peterson Air Force Base. A new memorial honored military aviators who had died not in combat, but from failures of leadership. Miguel Rodriguez's name was etched in black granite alongside 19 others. Elena attended in civilian clothes, standing in the back, unrecognized by most of the crowd. Jessica Kim, now Captain Kim and an instructor pilot herself, found her after the ceremony. "I've been using your teaching methods with my students," she said. "Leading by lifting others up, it's revolutionary how well it works." "It's not revolutionary," Elena replied. "It's just human. We've spent so long teaching dominance that we forgot to teach excellence. They're not the same thing." As they walked toward the parking lot, a young female lieutenant approached nervously.
"Excuse me, are you Thunder?" Elena started to deflect, then saw the hope in the young woman's eyes. "I used to be. Now I'm just a teacher." "Ma'am, when I saw that video of the typhoon, of what you did, it changed everything for
Me. I was about to quit, to give up my wings because I didn't think I belonged. But you showed me that belonging isn't about fitting in, it's about flying true." Elena touched the lieutenant's wings gently. "Then fly true, Lieutenant. And when someone tries to clip your wings, remember, they can take your uniform, your position, even your aircraft. But they can't take the sky from your soul." Epilogue. The sky remembers. The sun was setting over the Rocky Mountains, painting the clouds in shades of gold and crimson. Elena stood for a moment watching a flight of T-38s practicing overhead, their formation perfect against the dying light. She thought of Miguel, of all the flights they'd never take together, of all the lessons learned through loss. Some battles are won not with power, but with dignity. Some victories come not from defeating others, but from lifting them higher. And sometimes the greatest act of strength is choosing forgiveness over vengeance, choosing to build rather than destroy. As Elena drove home to Denver, back to her lesson plans and her students and her quiet life, she smiled. Tomorrow she would teach momentum and energy conservation and watch young minds grasp concepts they thought impossible. She would run her morning miles and tend her small garden and live the life she'd chosen. But tonight, in the space between earth and sky, she could still feel the ghost of wings. If you were her, after everything, the betrayal, the loss, the humiliation, would you forgive? Or would you seek the revenge that was so readily available? Perhaps the answer lies not in what we would do, but in understanding what we should do. Because in the end, the sky remembers not those who flew the highest, but those who lifted others up to fly beside them. What did you think of Elena's choice? Sometimes the most powerful victories come not from defeating our enemies, but from transforming them. And sometimes the greatest leaders are those who choose to teach rather than conquer. The story reminds us that everyone has hidden depths, that the quiet person beside you might have stories that would change how you see the world, and that true strength often lies not in what we can destroy, but in what we choose to build. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and become a part of our Everyday Life Stories community. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. We love hearing from our amazing viewers around the world. Thank you for joining Elena on her incredible journey of resilience and redemption. Your support means everything to us, and we can't wait to share more inspiring stories with you soon.